Why do Jews believe that God chose the Jewish people as his own and that he performed miracles on our behalf and revealed himself to us to present us with his divine law? So I might add, and no one else. And why do we continue to cling on to this? And everybody else, I'm adding, wants to replace us, whether it's the Islam or the Christians. They want to replace that. So what's your commentary? Thank you.
Okay, very good. Okay, so Rabbi, you got those questions. Very good.
All right. All right. So let's go back to the first question. The first question is really very exquisite. That first, do you ever have like a really great wine? Really, really great wine. Now, when I was a kid, I grew up with Kedem and Manischewitz. I had nothing against them, but I didn't know what great wine was until we actually started coming out with kosher great wine. And then when I finally had like a great wine from the land of Israel, from the Galilee, from Hebron, from that's Judea, or from the Golan, you just sit there, with a really good Cabernet that's dry, but and it's got all the flavors going on. And after you drink it, it's smooth. But then about 20 seconds, the flavors just came. You basically, your tongue starts dancing because there's so many things going on, and that's what happened in that first question. So I want to dance with the question. It's exquisite. So the Kuzari does address Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, who's a great Jewish thinker, philosopher. Oh yeah, be like him. That would be fabulous. He's my hero. But the question is, God chose the Jewish people to be given great blessings, and he had performed great miracles on behalf of the children of Israel. So, like, what does it mean to be chosen? So, in fact, that's a misunderstanding. Really, the entire book of Genesis is focusing completely on not God choosing a people, but rather finding a people, a family, one person that would choose him. It's not that God said, "You're white, you're yellow, you have a great hairline." That's not what happened here. If you look at Genesis, what God is doing is, I'd like to do this with you. What happens in Genesis is really very spectacular. If you go to Genesis 1, the helicopter is like flying it's moving really quickly. And what happens when you get to Abraham at the end of chapter 11, boom, it stops. And if you notice that when it gets to Abraham, it's like that's done. We may have a mention of Abraham, his father, or in-laws, or nephew, or something, but it's tangential to the story. Abraham is it, and then it's like Google Earth. When you hit the plus sign, it just magnifies on Abraham. What God is doing there is he's not choosing somebody, but he is looking for someone who would choose him, and that would be Abraham. And then what happens is that there's a weeding out process that goes on. God cannot work with Esau. He can work with Isaac. He cannot work with Ishmael. He can work with Jacob. And Jacob's 12 sons, they are not perfect. However, God can work with them. And what we have toward the end of the book of Genesis is essentially forging the royal family of those who would choose the God of Israel. And then, of course, toward the end, we are, of course, God is now weeding out to find who would lead the nation. Judah is going to emerge. Joseph is going to emerge very large here. And, of course, we will see that in Genesis 49, where the preeminence of leadership, the blessings of leadership, is bestowed on the descendants of Judah, who would ultimately be he is the progenitor of the Messiah, of King David. All these great people. What makes David exquisite is not that he was perfect. David did things that none of us have. What makes him so attractive, at least for me, I'm not saying to you, think like me, be like me. I'm just saying to you, for me, what makes David so attractive is not that, it is that he said, I stand before the Lord. He didn't give excuses. He didn't go but. Right? That's what's very unattractive about Saul. What's attractive about David is not that he was perfect. I don't need a man God. I need a man who's after God. So that answers the first question. Now, what happens is once that's locked up, God had made a promise to Abraham that from him would come forth a great nation. Genesis 15, 16, 17, that's all over the place. Now, the promise is affirmed with Isaac and then reaffirmed with Jacob. Once it goes to Jacob and his 12 sons, it's locked. Now, at that point, now God has a covenant. He has a promise, and he cannot break that promise no matter how much the Jewish people sin. It's an Abrahamic covenant. It is forever. The Jewish people, the nation of Israel, the land of Israel, it's eternal. Is in fact the nation of Israel, the land of Israel, is the only nation ever created through a sovereign act of God. Now, at that point, we have later stages where the Jewish people are going to wander and turn their back on the God of Israel in some ways that are very shocking. But Scripture tells us this, that no matter what happens, God would never destroy the Jewish people completely. Read the end of Leviticus 26. That's one of the hardest chapters in the Bible to read. It's just painful. But at the end, God says, I'll never, ever destroy you. I'll never break my covenant because I made a promise. So once God forged the promise, this is very critical. Once God forged the promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, so then the nation of Israel is charged with a mandate to be a light to the nations. I want you to listen to grasp this point. It can be stated that no people have ever suffered more than the Jews. So if any one of you out there is going, well, the Jews are chosen, what exactly were we chosen for? We don't have a monopoly on suffering, but no one has suffered as consistently, as miserably as the Jews throughout history. That was always known, not just in the 19th century. Mark Twain wrote about it. Everyone wrote about the suffering of the Jews. So don't think that we were chosen for securing our possessions and for wealth. We were chosen to be a light to the nations, to not to be afraid to stand up to the powerful leaders and tell them that, no, man is not a god, and we're not going to worship a man as a god. And you must love you. Every person is created in the image of God. That's what we were chosen for. And if you look at Deuteronomy 7, specifically verse 6, 7, do it now. Change your life today. What will you discover there? It'll say there, I didn't choose you because you're so numerous and you're so good. It's because of the promise I made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So that it's not that God chose you because you're white or black or yellow. God was looking for a people that would choose him, and he found it in a family of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They chose God, and in turn, God chose them. Okay?
Very good.
So that answers the first question.